Hi, everyone. I'm Tom Carroll, your friendly Idaho birding administrator. I'm interviewing ornithologist Terry Rich today, and we're going to talk about how birding is a great social distancing practice. We'll cover the basics of birding so you can get out in the yard, and eventually you can visit some of Idaho's hottest birding sites. So, Terry, what have you noticed in your life since you began social distancing with all this virus stuff?
Well, Tom, I think people who bird a lot are sort of natural social distancers. We get out there with our binoculars and the birds and maybe our dog, and that's kind of how we spend some of our normal life. But recently, what's been fun is it's been really quiet out there. I mean, there's almost no traffic. That's what I noticed. So if you go to the park or you're walking through the neighborhood, you want to go birding at Hyatt Lakes or someplace nearby, there's no traffic noise, and that's really fabulous. I think there are fewer people walking and running and even walking their dogs, which is a little strange because actually that's the perfect thing to be doing, under these conditions, is to get out there, get some fresh air, keep your distance, and do something that you enjoy doing.
So, and you're not seeing your family as much, or your kids and grandkids, so that must be a little strange too, huh?
Yeah, I'm actually doing, I suppose, more birding now because, we're supposed to keep our distance. I have 3 kids and 7 grandkids here in the Boise area. Wow. We're all staying apart from each other, where we normally see each other every few days for one thing or another. So that's a little weird, but again, it's a great outlet to be able to take that downtime instead of watching TV, get outside, and of course, looking at birds is great, especially this time of year.
Now, I really thanks so much for joining us today, because normally we'd be maybe attending one of your classes at the Boise, the Foothills Learning Center.
Right.
You've been such a valuable resource to sharing your knowledge and
Thank you.
Helping us all become better birders or learning about birding for the first time. And as you said earlier, I think birding is a perfect practice for social distancing. And some people who are watching this may have never practiced birding. They don't know too much about it. And I'm wondering if you could share with us some tips, because I know you work all the time with both beginning birders and then even scientists or biologists who do birding. But what should a beginner do, or what advice do you have for a beginning birder? How do you get started?
Sure. I spend, I think, a little bit of time in every one of my talks saying, basically, you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to have the best binoculars. You don't have any of that stuff. The main thing for birding is to enjoy the birds. And even if you don't know what they are, you can enjoy them and get started. And then maybe you'll go a little deeper and want to learn more and so on. So the perfect place really to start is when you're out in your yard, working in your garden, as we're going to be doing more and more of that now. If you're a runner and you're running, I always listen to birds when I'm running, bicycling, and I don't have my equipment in those cases, but I do listen. I listen and I watch. So it's very, very simple to start. Go out on your deck, take a cup of coffee or glass of iced tea or water, whatever it is, and sit down and start listening to the birds that are right in your neighborhood. And that's as simple as it is. I mean, you can just start. You don't have to go somewhere. You don't have to buy something. You don't have to put on particular clothes. Just go outside and start listening.
Now, I remember you telling a story of your first bird, when you first started noticing birds, and the bird that you noticed and you shared with your father. And he started laughing because it was, for him, such a common bird. Could you talk about that? That was sort of...
Yeah, you would bring up that one. Well, that was the starting point. My dad was actually quite a good amateur botanist, and we did a lot of hiking, prowling through the woods all the time. And one day I think it was in the winter, and we were in the living room, and I looked out of our window onto the roof across just, 10 feet away on the roof of our neighbor's house. And here it was this bird, and I just went, wow, what is that? It's so cool. Well, it was an adult male house sparrow. And I had literally seen it, although I'd seen probably thousands, hundreds. I had really saw it for the first time. And my dad was a mixture of sort of like You're kidding me. It's a house sparrow, dude.
So very common, right?
What a great way to start your ornithological career, right? So that's how simple it can be at the beginning. I guess that's a good point, Tom. I'm a case study.
Yeah, and me too. So when I started, I just began to notice a few things. I got a camera, and I only knew like the upland game birds, and then the big birds that we saw, the owls. I knew a couple owls, and I knew things like geese, large birds that I would just see around. And then all of the little birds I just classified kind of as little birds. I didn't really notice the difference, maybe like you, until one day I got a camera and I was taking pictures of a little bird, and I had a telescopic lens. And so this bird that I thought was kind of nondescript before, because it was so far away, I couldn't see with my naked eye. I couldn't appreciate the difference in color or texture of the plumage or anything like that. So again, all little birds, they were just little birds that were active in the thing, until I saw this beautiful bird, and it was a white-crowned sparrow. And I was like, it looked kind of just like a gray bird, but then when you really got in and you focused in on it, it's got this beautifully vibrant head, with these 3 stripes.
Right.
And it was white and incredible contrast.
Yep.
And that got me hooked. It's like, wow, what have I been missing all of my life? I've been overlooking all these beautiful things right in my own backyard.
That's right. Yeah. And we have a lot of, that's a great, I had a sparrow, you had a sparrow. That's a great place to start. That's how simple it is. But yeah, there are a lot of very cool things around. And if you do start kind of getting into it, you start looking more closely, then you start seeing what you saw and what I saw, and you maybe want to go a little deeper.
Now, Terry, what's a great way to begin to identify birds? So I see them in the backyard. How would you recommend someone go from seeing something in the backyard to determining what its identity is?
Yeah, it's a little tricky, because a lot of the field guides cover many hundreds of species. Like my favorite guide, I think, has over 1,000 species in it. That's not a very good place to start for a birder. In our area, we're lucky to have the birds of Boise Parks, which is about 100 species. And that's a little more manageable. You have some chance maybe of just flipping through the pictures. And that's how we usually start, is just, I saw this bird that looked kind of this size, and start flipping through pictures and see if you can picture match it, right? So the guide to the birds of the Boise City Parks is a good place to go. You don't have so many species to deal with.
And that one's both print, right? It's available in print and then also online free as a
It
PDF
is online,
document.
and if I can reach it here without running off.
Oh yeah, that's beautiful.
So small book.
I started with that, by the way. That's kind of funny. That's how I really started too. I got that book because it, like as you said, some of the other books were overwhelming. There were so many species, and then I looked at that. Another one that I found helpful was this book, David
Sibley. Yeah. Oh, basics. Right.
Yeah,
right.
This is really, really simple to begin. It has some great suggestions for how to look up these species, what to notice, because I had no idea what to notice with the birds, so that was helpful. So that's a great suggestion.
A really wonderful tool that's available on your phone for free is called Merlin, Merlin, and this is a beautiful little app that just asks you a couple simple questions. How big was the bird? I think you can choose up to 3 colors. What was it doing? Where are you? And what's the date?
Oh,
so
neat.
5 pieces of simple information that you can do when you're sitting in your chair on your deck, plunk it into your phone, and it'll say, hey, it'll show you a picture and say, was this your bird? And
are you finding people are really using that a lot more these days?
I find
in groups
that
you teach?
Beginners are having a lot of success with that, right? Advanced birders don't normally need it because they already know what most things are, but it's pretty effective. I sometimes just sit in a chair and say, let's see if I can trick Merlin, right? And I envision some bird in my mind and then put in answer those 5 questions. It's really good. So I highly recommend that. And then you can look at it and say, hey, yeah, that's it, or nope, that wasn't it. I wonder what it was. And they'll give you some other options, and you can, check it out. That's really nice.
Nice. Okay. Thank you. Now, as we get to learn the birds in our yard, by consulting Merlin and getting one of those books that's maybe specific to the state or to your area. What else can we do we can venture off and go off to the birding trail, the Idaho Birding Trail. And that's a vast network of trails that we can see. Could you talk a little bit about that? How do you ever consult the online site we have? Oh, okay, yeah, talk about what are those you have there?
Here's the hard copy. Remember hard copy?
Yeah. Oh, that.
Yeah. So these have just been updated. I just got these like within the last month. So there's 4 for different parts of Idaho.
Oh, nice.
The Birding Trail. It gives you literally. It's a kind of a driving trail. So it gives you a number of sites you can look at. In our case, here in the southwest of the state. Drive to this place, look for these birds. Drive to this place, look for these birds. So it very much holds your hand and takes you to known places where there are really cool things to see, like the snow geese out at Fort Boise right now. So it's a wonderful tool for people who just they've done their backyard, now they want to look around a little bit more. Maybe they've been around Boise City parks. This is a great next step in how to very safely and wisely get out there and kind of go to places that other people have basically checked and said, hey, this is cool here, you can go here.
So you have the hard copy that you can take with you as you're going out exploring. You have the map
Right.
available and the detail. And then here's the online version, which is free. And of course I guess you could put it on your phone, but the hard copy is so super handy. Although this would allow you to do maybe a little species research ahead of time. So I noticed that they have different categories. You can explore the trails that are available in your specific region.
Right.
You can look at the species is also very helpful. So you can look up specific species, and then what it does is it cross-references it to the different areas. So we could go, here's the checklist, and when I select American bittern, it tells me which birding trail sites the American bittern might be seen. So
Yeah, and that's really handy. And that's a really good example, American bittern, a very skulky bird hiding out in the marshes. If you just kind of go blundering around the country, you're probably not going to see an American bittern. So if you really want to see this bird, which is incredibly cool, and if you can, check out its toes. They're the longest, greenest toes you've ever seen. Looks like an alien. This is the kind of information that really helps you say, hey, I can go to this spot, and my chances of seeing this cool bird are much higher than just trying to get lucky somewhere.
Okay, neat. Now, Terry, I know the virus is kind of a bummer, right? And we're confined to the house. Now, however, it is opportune in the sense that we got a little bit more time that we can go birding, perhaps, for some people, because they might be staying home and social distancing. And then the other thing is migration's happening. So we got a bunch of birds coming in to the state. Could we talk a little bit about what migration is, the different kinds of migrants, and then how we might take advantage of some of the information about migration to go see some new birds?
Sure. Well, let's start with just this idea that there are kind of some big groups of basically differently behaving birds. We have our residents. People are familiar with chickadees and house finches and Canada geese, I'm sure, mallards. These are birds that are here all year round, all around the valley. You can see them any month, any week, any day, really. Then you have, we have a lot of birds in the valley that people are familiar with because they come down out of the mountains in the winter to our feeders. Dark-eyed juncos are probably the best example, little gray and white sparrow-sized birds. They love sunflower seeds. We have some raptors, have some owls. We have some other birds that come down just for the winter, and then as soon as about this time of year, they start going back up slope. And so they're altitudinal migrants. But kind of the migrants that a lot of us get really excited about that are starting to come in now are the birds that completely leave the U.S. off and go, they may be spending the winter in Mexico, Central, and even South America. Swainson's hawks, for example, go clear to Argentina.
Wow.
So those birds are starting to come back now. And it's always fun to see them come back into the neighborhood, to start hearing them sing. Heard a kilder, I think 2 weeks ago now, calling over my house. And they come back in different sorts of waves at different times. But it's a really great time of year to be outside, because any day you might see something that has just arrived overnight from Mexico.
Yeah, neat. And as you were saying, I just not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, we got a chance to go out and see the waves of snow geese, as you mentioned earlier, out by Parma, and those are still in Fort Boise, out in that area, and then greater white-fronted geese.
Yeah.
There were many of them, and then sandhill cranes, all kind of in the same area in large flocks.
Yeah,
and it was just incredible to watch them. And we'll be able, as you say, we'll be able to see more birds as they come in. But right now there's geese and ducks that are starting to show up that we hadn't seen for a little while. And then some of them, like the snow geese, are just passing through. Is that right, Terry? So they're only here for a short time on their trip. So it's like a layover for them.
Yeah, absolutely. They'll be here for, several weeks, but they're nesting way up in the Arctic tundra. So in a little while, they'll be heading away to their northern breeding grounds. And it's true, especially for a lot of the shorebirds. We don't get a lot of shorebirds around here unless you go to Lake Lowell and really kind of watch the shorelines, because we don't have that much water. We're not on the coast. But these shorebirds come in very briefly this time of year and then bomb way north, because most of those nest on the tundra. And they'll be up there in the summer, and then they'll come back through briefly in the fall, again, just around maybe for a week or two, and then they're gone, and they're heading down to Panama and Venezuela and the coast of South America. So some of these guys are just, they're just coming through spring and fall, and then we won't see them the rest of the year.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see them kind of march in and do their thing, or fly in and do their thing. So we see also Osprey too. We're getting notice on Idaho Birding. We're starting to see some pictures of Osprey show up. So and that's kind of a nice sensor, actually, for a migration sensor. And all of you Idaho Birding members, this is one reason why it's important to identify the species whenever you make a post. Identify the species name, the date that the picture was taken, and then if you can, also the location, at least to the county level, would be nice, so that we know there are ornithologists, other people who are looking at this data, this information, and it's useful for them even. And so if they don't have that labeling information, it's hard for beginners to know what kind of birds they're looking at. It's also difficult for other people who want to use that data for a little bit more rigorously if it's not there, it's not there. So it's useful for them. For example, when the curlews first started coming in, those curlews are being radio tracked by a program by the IBO, the Intermountain Bird Observatory's curlew crew.
Yes.
Group. So they're tracking, right? And then they know one of the Idaho Birding members had a photo of a curlew that showed up. So it was before the official tracked curlews started to come into the state. So in advance of that.
Yeah. I mean, Jay Carlisle and his colleagues over at Idaho Intermountain Bird Observatory now have really asked everybody to, hey, tell us when you see a curlew, exactly where, exactly when. For example, when I drive down Simcoe Road heading to Grandview to hit Mudflat Road, it's a good place to watch for curlews. And even if you just see one curlew, it's good to pull over, get into a safe place, and log that time, that date, and that location. They really appreciate those data. And of course, I assume maybe you're heading to what eBird is.
Yes.
Doing that for everything, turns the enjoyment you get, the photographs you get. That's a personal satisfaction that we all really enjoy. And as you get started in birding, you'll probably figure that out, that it's pretty satisfying. But then you also contribute to science and to the greater understanding of what these birds are doing, where they're going, where they are. And if there's conservation problems, like there is with curlews and a lot of species, having those simple data of where and when did you see this bird, in aggregate, this can be quite helpful. If you can, and if you get into a little bit more, contributing to science is really easy through eBird. Contributing those sightings is quite easy. It's a free program. It was developed by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, which is sort of the the world center for all things ornithology and the National Audubon Society. And it's a very sophisticated global database, but it's also very easy to use. So it's got a really nice combination of ease and sophistication. So for us using it, it's very simple. And again, there's an app on the phone. You can use it on the web. You basically just put in the data we just talked about. What species, what time, and where were you? Those are the big ones. So it's all about accumulating location and timing data for all the species that you can identify.
So you're helping not only the other researchers, people who are researching bird health and their movement, but you are also keeping a personal record of everything that you've seen as well, right? So you can go back in and
that's right.
Yeah, you've documented that, maybe even added some photos or some sounds as well.
Yeah, I mean,
capture
all the species you put in there, it's typically called a checklist. It's just the list of birds you saw when you were out in some place for some period of time. And you can, if you like to take photos, they love photos, you can upload photos. If you record bird songs, you can upload your bird recordings. And as you said, this not only goes into the big database for analysis by ornithologists, but you can go anytime. I can go anytime and look at any checklist from 10 years ago or whenever I started. I can go and look at that date, that place, and say, oh yeah, I saw these species. I got this really nice picture, of a great horned owl, and there it is. So it's sort of the perfect balance between a personal tool and a larger tool for the greater good.
And Terry, does that go, even when you go, because you've taken some really extensive and far away birding trips, are you still able to enter that data in? So if you went to South America, for example.
Yeah, you can. It's a global database, and it's absolutely amazing what they have done with this. It's, like I said, very sophisticated. You can go anywhere on the planet. And eBird, and a nice thing about eBird, which you need even in the Great Basin, if I go into the middle of Nevada, or even the Waihe uplands for that matter, where there's no internet service, eBird will store all of your sightings on your phone, and then when you get back to the grid, you just upload it, and you're off to the races. So it's keeping track. It knows where you are. Your phone knows where you are, even if you don't have internet, and it records that information. So anywhere on the planet, you can record birds. Antarctica, I don't care. Pick a spot.
Pick a spot. And then one feature of eBird that you shared with us in some classes that I've attended with you is the bar charts feature for getting data, the availability, abundance, and availability of bird species in an area. You can just look at these charts. So we've got here, I'm going to choose Idaho. And so this is going to produce a map of, and I'm going to do the entire region to make it kind of simple. And it's going to list all of the species of birds reported having been seen in our area for a specific time frame. And Terry, could you kind of talk to us about what we're seeing here?
Sure. This is a real old school way to show how common birds are by month. So if you look across the top, it's the whole year. It's January, February, March through the end of the year, December. And then those green blocks basically give you an idea of how relatively common things are throughout the year. So you've got the cursor on snow goose. If you want to see a snow goose around here, the very end of June is the first week of July is a very bad time. There are no snow geese here.
No, none of them here.
July, right? But you go back here to the middle of March where we are right now, that's when the snow geese are around. So that's the very simple and very effective way to use these bar graphs or bar charts.
Wow, yeah, and check it out. And you see, so this, like a wood duck, for example, it looks like they're, again, kind of a resident species. They're around all year long.
Exactly. We're talking about the sort of big groups of birds that migrate or don't migrate. There's your classic resident. You'll see that from mallards, Canada geese, house finch, these other birds that you can see literally any day you walk out your door. You have a really good chance of seeing these birds.
And then here's an example of maybe a tighter migratory pattern where you've got with a blue-winged teal and a cinnamon teal, you're going to see them in these months, but almost nothing at either end.
Right. So in the winter, they're gone. They're leaving our area, probably just to stick with open water. So they're going south. Maybe not all that far south, but at least out of here, maybe toward the West Coast, you know, where they've got some open water to work with. And as soon as it warms up a little bit, yeah, here they come back. The first things we start seeing that are new for the spring are waterfowl. Now, there's a lot of species. These birds, nature's really complex and it's very messy. It's very hard to categorize things. But roughly speaking, you start getting more waterfowl moving in March, and that's when birders start getting kind of interested to get out there, get their social distance, look at a pond and see what kind of ducks, geese, and other birds are coming in that have been missing for the winter.
We're approaching this season where animals are starting to nest. What are some suggestions from someone who is really sensitive to that? What should you be aware of in terms of safety to the birds and to the birders?
Yeah,
ideas about that?
Yeah, that's a really good point. The American Birding Association actually has a code of birding ethics. I encourage people to look that up. It's online. And basically it's just like, you know, give these animals some space. You know, you get a rare bird anywhere in the country. We had these great gray owls the last few winters, but any rare bird or a bird on a nest, you know, you just want to give them some space. You get too close, they get stressed out. They might abandon the nest. They might leave the area. You know, if you just got to have a photograph, get a big lens and try to stay back. Make your visits as brief as you can. And especially if you're in the birds that are on the ground or in bushes, you know, if everybody walks up to the nest and turns around and walks back, the next raccoon that comes by is going to go, oh, let's see what these people have here. Maybe they drop some potato chips. Well, then they go in and they find the nest. So when you're in especially grassland, sagebrush country, you're taking pictures, keep walking through the habitat. Don't go to a spot, turn around and go back. But the main thing is just give them some breathing room. Don't get in their face. And if you got 20 people in their face, big cameras, you know, you're stressing them out. They may not show it, but it could have negative effects. And again, could lead predators to a nest, that sort of thing.
So predators to a nest, and could cause them to even abandon their nest, right? If they're, if they got young, freaks them out. So we see here, we're going back to this list again and looking in April, we start to see more activity in some of these birds. And like you said, it looks like with the Bullock's oriole, they might be fruit and seed eaters. Is that right?
Yeah.
Showing up.
The nectar and insect eaters tend to come in a little bit later. So Bullock's oriole is a good example of that. I mean, they like nectar. They like to probe flowers. They eat insects. They'll eat grape jelly off your porch. But they're not going to come around until you start getting some flowers, some fruit, some nectar, and insects. And so a lot of these really, our favorite birds, our most colorful birds, our Western tanager, Bullock's oriole, lazuli bunting, Western kingbirds. A lot of these guys come back after the waterfowl, after the shorebirds, and it's April and May when they release, and some of them not until May really show up in numbers because they're just waiting for the insect burst.
Yeah, and you see here, that's a wonderful point too. Look you see the hummingbirds, 3 of them that had been out of here. They don't generally overwinter here. And you've got broad-tailed, broad-billed, black-chinned hummingbirds, so they begin to show up at that time in that April-May time frame.
Right, and also calliope might be on there.
Yeah.
One of the interesting birds that we're learning about around here these days are the Anna's hummingbirds, which have actually been overwintering in Boise. A little different beast. They're not like these other hummingbirds that just seem to totally leave, 100% gone in the winter every year. They just don't hang around. Anna's is a little different beast. So that's an interesting exception in the hummingbird world.
Huh, do you know why that's the case? Or
I don't myself. I think they're only hanging around where people are leaving feeders out.
Oh,
But the point is, even with feeders, if you're leaving hummingbird feeders out and you're keeping them warm, so the annas will take advantage of that, but the other hummingbirds don't seem to be interested in that deal. Why is that? You know, it's another one of a million fascinating thing about birds.
yeah, and probably again, it's there are so many areas or lots of unknowns about things like migration and whatever that keeps ornithologists busy and excited, right? There's much to learn.
Much to learn. Yeah, maybe people would be surprised at how little we know about some of the wintering and especially migration routes of these species. You know, they're flying at night. Technology is really helping because as we're able to get transmitters and recorders of various types smaller and smaller and smaller, we're able to attach these things to ever smaller birds and get data from them and figure out where the heck did they go last September. So the technology is really helping a lot, but there's a lot we don't know. And one of my favorite maps is the wintering map of the common nighthawk, which basically, if you look at the map, I think it still is the entire Amazon basin. Well, there's a pretty good chance it's not the entire Amazon basin. They're probably picking some spots. We just don't have the detailed data yet. We'll get there, I think. But we don't have the detail yet for a lot of species. We don't know exactly where they go. So the range maps tend to be big globs.
Oh, okay. So now that's an interesting species too, because they're down south right now, right? But they're going to show up in the middle part of the summer, maybe early summer, for a few months. Then they'll be here. So it'll be what, common nighthawks and maybe poor-wills or whippoorwills or one of those birds.
The common nighthawks and poor-wills are two of the last species to really show up in any numbers. And of course, they're aerial insectivores like swallows. They fly around eating bugs on the wing. And I was looking at some of the data for North Idaho, and they don't show up in North Idaho until June.
Oh,
so,
wow.
I mean, they're really, that's about the last bird, the last bird to come up through Idaho is a common nighthawk. So pretty interesting. They got to have the big bugs out there, or they just don't have anything to eat.
So Terry, before we sign off, I was wondering if you could share a little bit about the notion of birding the gray space. It with eBird. And so I'll put up, let's see if I can put up eBird again.
Ken Rosenberg at Cornell actually calls it the white space, but I think on the maps it actually is gray. Yeah, it's simply the idea that people tend to go to the same places to look at birds. Everybody goes to Catherine Albertson Park and Hyatt Lake and maybe Bogus Basin and maybe Malheur, maybe Lake Lowell. So a lot of people go to the same places. But there are a lot of places on this planet where literally no one has ever turned in a bird sighting. And southwestern Idaho and the Great Basin are full of these places. I mean, you can imagine if we can get this map up, there's just a lot of spots where nobody has ever been and actually turned in a bird list. So any time of the year, even summer, never mind winter. So one of the things I enjoy doing, especially when I'm traveling across the Great Basin or down into the Owyhee uplands, is the Owyhee Mountains up to Silver City. Look at these maps and see where nobody's ever gone, and go there and spend 10 minutes, record the birds you've got, and link them into the database. So
we've got a region, and this is one of your favorite species, I think, right?
It is, yeah. That's my master's thesis and my Gmail name both, so I'm a real fan.
You are. Okay, so what are these purple areas that we see on the map?
Okay, so we're in Explore by Species in eBird. So what you'll do is you're zooming in on Google Earth. The big purple squares show locations where this species has been seen at some time of the year in some year. That's all we know at this point. And I assume you're going to zoom in a little bit more.
Yeah, where do we need to go? Maybe here?
Yeah, that's a kind of a curious one, actually, because it's kind of up in the mountains, up by Grangeville. But as you zoom in, then you will get to the ability to get more particular information. Okay, now that purple square basically was put on this single blue point right there. And that point is some person who spent some time, and if you click on it, you can see what it is. All right, so Chris, and I'll not try the last name. Chris was there on,
oops, right here.
Okay, there you go. So February, for crying out loud, that's very odd. So we've got February, where it's February 8th, 4:30 in the afternoon. This individual saw 3 species, and there they are: American kestrel, a robin, and a sagebrush sparrow, which is very surprising to me. And if you, there also somewhere here is how much time this person spent, and if they, yeah, then by the little human profile, you can see there were actually 2 people there who did this. There you go. So there were 2 people there on that date at that time, and this is what they saw. One other detail under the word Chris over there, it says incidental. So that simply means that they weren't identifying everything they saw. In fact, they probably saw one of these species driving by and got out of their car and said, whoa, let's mark this, and then they saw the other 2. So it's an incidental, it's not a complete list, but this is perfectly fine, perfectly great information.
Interesting. And then, so the whole notion about birding the white space, what does that mean relating to this map?
Well, this is a really good example, because this is very curious to have a sagebrush sparrow in February in this location. I would not expect it at all. So as you can see, there are no other checklists from February for a sagebrush sparrow. So, you know, it's curious. Are there other sagebrush sparrows? If I lived near there, I'd be tempted to go out in February into the places where sagebrush sparrows had not been seen, which it looks like that whole area, and see if there's some more around. Maybe there's some birds wintering that we had no idea about.
So this really appeals to people with an adventurous spirit.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, when people started doing all this geocaching, it's like, wow, we've been doing that for birds for a long time, right? Going out and into the boondocks to find a particular thing at some location. Well, the thing is with these guys, we don't know if they're there or not. So it's always a treasure hunt when you're birding, and especially when you're doing white space or gray space birding.
Well, Terry, I really appreciate, and we do with Idaho Birding, all your sharing and your willingness to share your knowledge and help us all become better and help protect the birds and become more aware of the species. So thanks so much for being on. Well,
thanks for doing this, Tom. This is fun. It's a great tool when we're not allowed to. I can't touch you. We're safe. It's a great way to do it, and thanks for bringing your technological expertise to bear on this. We should look into doing some more.
We can hopefully look forward as the species ramp up, and you have so many different types of presentations. It'd be great to get a few of those here while you can't be up at the foothills doing your magic.
Yeah, Foothills canceled all their programs. Audubon canceled all their field trips. So that's it's you and me on the web, it looks like. Hopefully somebody else will find it interesting.
All right. Well, thanks a bunch, Terry. Take care.
Thanks, Tom.
Bye-bye.
See ya.